granniopteryx, granniopteryx. She knows the truth, she's linking every link.
Hello. A man, Joshua Haynes, died completely unnecessarily because his doctor didn't see him. All he got from the doctor was a telephone consultation, and as we know, in a telephone consultation, the doctor cannot see his patient. I'll go into the question of incompetence or bigotry in a moment. But first, I want to contrast this situation with that of another doctor, the case of Dr. Keith Wolverson, who has recently been struck off because he couldn't see his patient and refused to continue the consultation until he could see the patient. Now, I have to say, technically, he wasn't struck off for that particular infraction of the rules, whatever rules they'd cooked up. But ultimately, that was the reason. So, to be picky about the facts here, the patient was a child, and the person Dr. Wolverson demanded to see was the child's mother, who, while not the patient, was speaking for the toddler and so, in effect, carried at the very least the patient's voice. So just to clarify things, Dr. Majid here, Dr. Saleh Majid, will certainly not be struck off for not seeing his patient, which was the cause of his patient's death, while Dr. Wolverson was struck off for demanding to see his patient. Just thought you'd like to get that straight. Now, who was to blame in this case? Well, it turns out it was something of a perfect storm, I suppose. What happened was that this man here told a GP he thought he might have diabetes, but of course he was self-diagnosing over the phone, and because he was reporting severe dehydration, vomiting and slurred speech, and the GP thought that he might be suffering from a stomach bug, and advised him to contact the non-emergency NHS number rather than be seen in person. So, look, there's no doubt that Mr. Haynes should have rung 999. He obviously wasn't aware of how sick he was. But he possibly was the type who didn't want to make a fuss, and being a previously big, strong man, didn't think of himself as all that ill. That really is on him. The doctor, who'd been told by Mr. Haynes that he was vomiting a lot, obviously thought of a stomach bug first, considering this man's profile. And that's not an unreasonable conclusion to reach. But if he'd been seen, if Mr. Haynes had presented himself at the doctor's surgery, I'm pretty sure the doctor would have realised that this was more than a stomach bug, because he would have probably pushed his stomach and there wouldn't have been that sort of pain. But anyway, we'll never know now. We cannot entirely dismiss the possibility that Dr. Majid is incompetent, or not too bright, and neither can we dismiss the possibility that Dr. Majid is a Muslim who didn't think much of his non-Muslim patients. That's always a consideration somewhere along the line. I'm sure this must have flashed through a few minds upon seeing the newspaper article. But none of this can be proved because none of us really knows. And we also have to acknowledge the fact that all doctors are overworked. They are frequently subject to unreasonable expectations from the National Health Service. For instance, as I understand it, the rule is 10 minutes per patient. It isn't a legal rule, but if a doctor habitually spends more time than that on each consultation, then there'll be bureaucratic blowback. sooner or later. And remember, this 10-minute slot is expected to cover not just talking to the patient, but reading the patient notes, then having the consultation, and then updating the records, advice given, medication, blood pressure readings, and so on, in 10 minutes. So you can imagine that any doctor would be relieved to be shot of a patient in a 4-minute telephone conversation, which then would free up more space for other patients with longer consulting times. So immediately concluding that this doctor was incompetent or bigoted, well, it's a possibility, but there's a whole lot of other stuff going on that we have to consider first. During the telephone call, Dr. Majid agreed with Mr. Haynes' concern. He must have been online and he tracked down the symptoms. And Dr. Majid agreed that diabetes was a possibility and that diabetes could just develop out of the blue. But he couldn't assess, of course, how far down the line he was. And even if it was diabetes, he didn't expect it to be at a life-threatening stage. And he couldn't envisage that because he couldn't see the bloody patient. And being on the phone couldn't do much about that either. Again, let's contrast that with Dr. Wolverson, who was effectively deprived of his living. He's been struck off the medical register, which means he can't work as a doctor anymore. And he was deprived of his living for demanding to see his patient. Now, there's little prospect of Dr. Majid being deprived of his continuing livelihood, even though his patient died because he didn't see him. And he didn't demand to see him. And that was not entirely his fault, but it's ironic that Dr. Wolverson was struck off because he did want to see his patient. He was being a stickler for person-to-person communication. And of course, the General Medical Council don't have anything to say about that, do they? It's a funny old world, isn't it? Till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.